So we should have it all set here. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just setting up the Facebook Live here, just so you know, and I am recording this as well, so you're aware. And it should be working. Okay, says we're live here. So we'll get going. We might have a few more people join, but I'm glad we got the Facebook Live set up here. I'm going to share my screen here. And I just got a couple of quick slides and introduction of Dave here. So good afternoon, everybody. Should be able to see my screen okay. Welcome to our Stormwater Management Lunchtime Learning Sessions. Normally this is called a Lunch and Learn, but I thought that was a little deceiving because obviously we're at home, so we can't provide food right now. But today we're going to be talking about reimagining parks and green spaces for stormwater management. These are going to be quick sessions. I'm really excited for this. You're here if you're on Zoom, then obviously you figured out the registration, but there's the registration information here for those other two sessions as well. And then I'll just note that my position, which I'll talk about a little bit in a second, and this work that I'm able to do is funded through a grant through the EPA, and that's managed by the Division of Water. So my name is Becca, and I'm the Watershed Coordinator for Currys Fork Watershed. You might have heard of Currys Fork. This is a watershed-based effort to improve polluted waterways. I've got a map here so you can kind of get a sense for where the Currys Fork Watershed is here in Oldham County. And I'm an employee of Oldham County Fiscal Court. So it's Oldham County Fiscal Court that manages and supports this effort. Just a quick rundown of some of the work that we do: stream restoration, streamside planting, septic system repair, rain gardens, workshops like this one, and much more. Most of what we do you can find out about on our Facebook page, Currys Fork Watershed. And then we have a local watershed group called Friends of Currys Fork, and everybody is encouraged to join and participate in that. And then again, my name is Becca, and my email is right here. rtrueman@oldhamcountyky.gov. That's the easiest way to reach me. And like I said, this is the first of 3 sessions. So our first session here is today. Our second session is going to be 1 week from today on January 28th. That one's going to cover vegetation management for stormwater quantity and quality. And then a week from that will be our third session on February 4th, inspecting and maintaining green infrastructure. And then David Gamstetter, who is going to be providing this information for us for these 3 sessions. He works for the Davey Resource Group. They're out of Cincinnati. So Dave is a project manager for the Davey Resource Group. He is responsible for building relationships with public and private partners and providing services for installing, maintaining, and inspecting green infrastructure structures and systems. Mr. Gamstetter has extensive experience in urban forest management, invasive plant species control, park management, street and park master planning, and horticulture. And from there, I will turn it over to Mr. David Gamstetter. You can go ahead. I'll stop sharing my screen. And I'll let you share your screen. And if anybody has questions or comments, feel free to put those in the chat, and we will have some time for questions at the end as well.
Hello, everybody. As Becca mentioned, I'm with Davey Resource Group. We're a national company. We have offices throughout North America and into Canada. We specialize in many things. You're probably familiar with Davey Tree Expert Company. We are a part of the Davey team, and we specialize more in ecological restoration, invasive species management, and we've done quite a bit of work with stream restoration and wetland restoration, and we have kind of rolled out a new phase of stormwater management and green infrastructure. So I work in the Cincinnati market, and we do cover the northern half of Kentucky. The western part of Kentucky is covered largely by our Indianapolis office. And my role here is to meet you all and maybe join your watershed management team, and to just explain, different ways of managing stormwater. Some are kind of large scale solutions. Like today, we're going to talk about looking at open space and parks for stormwater management. I'm going to do 2 different cities as case studies. The first one is Cincinnati, Ohio, where I worked for 30 years, and I worked on the projects I'll be showing you. And the other one is Malmo, Sweden. I had the opportunity to go there at the end of 18. I was working on a research project with the Sweden Agricultural University, looking at how green infrastructure can be used to meet United Nations Sustainable Development Guidelines. So they got a big grant, and Cincinnati was one of their case studies. And it was very interesting to go there and see what they're doing. So I'm going to share part of that experience with you today. And hopefully I'll give you a lot of different things to think about, because I'm not just talking about, basic rain gardens. These are complex systems that are interconnected, and rejoining the community back together through green infrastructure and increasing accessibility and opportunities within the park systems. So we're going to start with a couple of definitions. Uh-oh, my slide isn't advancing. Oh no. Okay, I got it now. It's my first time doing sharing my screen on Zoom. I've used different platforms, but never Zoom. So I want to give you a couple definitions. The first one is green infrastructure. What is it? What am I talking about? Well, the Clean Water Act defines it as the range of measures that use plants or soil systems, permeable pavement, or other permeable surfaces or substrates, stormwater harvesting and reuse, or landscaping to store, infiltrate, or evapotranspirate stormwater and reduce flows to sewer systems and surface waters. That's a lot to say. That is a big mouthful. But now I'm going to double down on it. This is the kind of the nuts and bolts of it, and why we think this is a very viable solution for many of our communities. It's a cost-effective, resilient approach to managing wet weather impacts that provides many community benefits. While single-purpose gray stormwater infrastructure designed to move urban stormwater away from the built environment, green infrastructure reduces and treats stormwater at its source while delivering environmental, social, and economic benefits. So what we're talking about is kind of restoring the natural systems that take place around us, where we don't have very highly complex, paved, developed communities. And so what I thought was interesting from the 2 cities that I've worked on, well, actually, we also did some work with Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, which is a totally different animal. Different issues, different problems, but Malmo and Cincinnati were both kind of similar in how they're addressing some of these concerns and problems with stormwater. And both communities are using their parks and open spaces for managing stormwater and integrating it for exponential benefits. So parks can serve their primary goals to offer both passive and active recreation, while also containing spaces that mitigate stormwater. Green infrastructure can achieve essential utility functions in the community while creating environments that provide nearby nature experiences and support human health. Parks and clean water are both important public commodities, and combining the 2 offers great opportunities for collaboration. In the simplest form, water management requires space, and parkland is a leading resource of space in cities. Conversely, park maintenance requires money, which most communities have to balance budgets with, police and fire departments, and parks are always scrapping for every dollar they can get. And then water utilities, such as sewer or stormwater departments, usually have a steady, predictable source of revenue. So we need to think about how we're going to integrate these systems in our parks through careful planning and community engagement. But there are great rewards if it's done properly. And today I'm going to show you some projects that I think are very rewarding. So I wanted to look at, really, do we really have the opportunity in our high density, highly developed communities and cities, do we really have room to do this kind of work? So I looked at the Trust for Public Land statistics. This is from 19. I don't think it's changed much as of now. But look at New York City. We think of New York City as a very, very high developed community, but they have almost 22% of their area is parkland, 40,000 total park acres. Big numbers. DC, we're looking at 21.1%. There's probably not as many opportunities in DC for great infrastructure integration, but San Francisco, we're looking at almost 20%. Jersey City, Boston, Minneapolis. These are all cities that are considered to be pretty well developed, but they all have a substantial percentage of land area devoted to parkland. So the first one I want to start with is Malmo. Malmo is a coastal city. It's just above sea level, and there's a lot of concern about climate change and rising sea levels in Malmo. They also get quite a bit of rainfall, and it's very flat. So they have problems with stormwater. They have problems getting it out of some parts of the city. They see it as a value to reuse it as much as possible and to integrate it. They don't have combined sewer systems like we have in Cincinnati, but they still have flooding issues. And then Cincinnati, my hometown, both cities are similar size. Cincinnati has more rainfall, 42 inches. The topography is very hilly. It's very different, but the land use is kind of the same. And the primary issue in Cincinnati is combined sewer overflows. So Malmo, you can see the park space is very well spread out. The dotted areas they're looking at for opportunities for linkages with greenways and trail systems. And green infrastructure is very much a part of all of these plans in these parks. And Cincinnati, likewise, there's about 5,000 acres of park forest, 85,000 street trees. And the parkland is spread out pretty much throughout the city. But again, it's very hilly. So the opportunities here are very different than Malmo. So the first project I want to show you, this is Soderkula Park. This is a detention project. The park is on a slope. It's not real steep, but the water through sheet flow, there was some impervious surface, but a lot of it was just open lawn areas like this one. Downstream from here, there's a community that was single family homes, very densely developed, smaller homes with a driveway, a small yard, small house. And they had a big rainfall event and it flooded out the whole community. So they wanted to look at how they could manage that water upstream. And the first place they looked was this park. And so part of the solution was to excavate some of the soil out of this. Even though it is a slope, we still have drainage out, but they could detain parts of it by creating these small basins in lawn areas. They're still used as lawn areas. It's still used for passive recreation. I mean, when I was there were people throwing Frisbees and out there hanging out in these areas. It gets wet sometimes in the bottom of the basins, but it's still used for passive recreation. And they did their best to locate these away from existing groves of trees. And then I thought this was a real interesting idea. They lowered their playground by about 2 feet to detain the stormwater during heavy rain events. So this fills up with water and then it slowly drains back into the separate storm system that before, when they had the flooding problems, was getting overwhelmed with all the stormwater. So between the two different concepts and ideas, there was enough storage provided to offset most of the peak flows and reduce downstream flooding. This is the Augustenborg Botanical Roof Garden. This is a public facility. It's where their public services people work. This is the building where they send out the waste collection trucks, you know, trash pickup, the road crews, the people that take care of all the street lights in Malmo, all the public services that you can think of are combined in a series of 3 or 4 buildings. And there is a priority in all of Scandinavia and Sweden specifically. I think Germany is #1 in green roofs. I think Sweden is #2 to develop green roofs because of the environmental benefits that they get. The roofs are transpiring water. They're filtering it through the media and the plants. They're slowing down peak flow. There's a lot of benefits to it, as well as preserving the length of time that the roof is functional. You get more years out of it if you put on a green roof, and energy conservation. So they partnered with the Scandinavian Green Roof Institute. They gave them some space in their building, and they set up a big demonstration experimental garden. So the scope of this is just huge. We got to go up there and walk around and look at it. And they bring people here from throughout Europe and the United States to do training, and universities sponsor different experiments. And they do different types of planting. They're looking at, you know, different plant ecotypes and how well they manage stormwater and how well they grow on green roofs. You know, here we have a couple different types that we use. We have intensive, extensive, you know, but they're kind of, you know, based on where we live, we use these certain plants. And in Malmo, they're looking at, well, what else can be done? How can we do something that's going to be able to be used in the northern parts of Scandinavia, as well as the southern part? Malmo is like the southernmost part of Sweden. And how can this technology be transferred and used, and how can we experiment and figure out what works best? So they do water testing for the water that comes off of the roof. And it was a really interesting use of public space that isn't impaired by the installation of the stormwater management controls. They have partners to help manage it. And it was just a really cool place to go visit. I would like to spend a couple days there. And then that's just not the end of it. So the water that comes off of the roof, remember, this is a public services facility. People work here that, you know, are mostly office administrative people in this building. So they built this little observation platform, and they did a canal system with wetlands incorporated into it for stormwater filtration. And there's also some detention built in and retention. I believe water stays here in this one with the cattails year round. And so they incorporated this green space into this public building in spaces that were just mowed before this. And so from there, it leaves, and this is a very developed community. There are apartment complexes on either side of this that were built in the 60s and 70s. And this was a retrofit. So they built this low flow system down the middle. And then parts of this are vegetated with wetland type plants on either side. You can see where the walkways are. People, you know, this is where they enter their apartments and stuff. There's a lot of bikes tied up and stuff. They do rooftop separation. Their stormwater, their gutters flow into this system, and it goes downstream where it's pumped into another canal where it drains. But they were talking about, you know, meeting with the community, meeting with the people that live in the apartments, and trying to come out with what would people accept. They didn't want standing water. They didn't want mosquitoes. They didn't want it to be muddy. So they put in this low flow canal structure channel, and then planted the wetland plants on either side. And there is a wetland basin at the end of this that it flows through before it's pumped out to another part of the city through a pipe where it daylights. And then in Cincinnati, I worked in the park department. I was the natural resource manager for the city. And for 5 years of my career, I actually worked with our sewer department doing the stream restoration project. It's also a combined sewer overflow project, as well as conducting green infrastructure projects. So we actually constructed them. We met with the community. We got feedback. We decided, what was acceptable, what needed to be modified. We worked with the designer, the design team, the engineers, and came up with a series of projects that we constructed using contracts that we bid out. So this one was one of the first ones I worked on. Alt Park is one of our regional parks. It's in a very affluent community. And you can see the stream channel is completely degraded. This is a sewer, it's a combined sewer where it's highly eroded. All these plants are invasive. There's amber honeysuckle, lesser celandine, pretty much nothing of value. There's no habitat. There were no, obviously there's no amphibians or inhabitants of the stream here. It was just a dead system. So the concept was, so let me go back. So what this was, in about 1900, this was a stream channel that flowed through the park. And instead of building a bridge up here, they just filled this valley with, they put in a sewer system below here. They filled in this valley with fill and built the park entrance road on this. It's actually a neighborhood road with 2 lanes that connects the park to the neighborhood and then to the neighborhood on the other side. So the idea for this project was to do some testing on the sewer system, to reline parts of it that were failed, and to put in this culvert right here. This is an existing wetland that was there. We worked around it. And so, and then close off all the stormwater. All this water was getting into the combined sewer system before. It would drop in an inlet on the other side of this road fill and drop into the combined sewer where it would flood downstream and overflow the sewer system. So then, and then the stream channel was reconstructed. So this is part of the area where we directed them. We looked at what vegetation was there, what was quality and what was not. And we created these places where they could get from the haul road to the stream to do the stream restoration project without disturbing mature trees. And we also tried to direct them in areas that were heavy with invasive plants so that, we don't want them there. And then when they were finished, they went back and touched up with herbicide treatments to get them out, and then restored it with different plantings. We also looked at all the trees impacted by the project. There was a community request to preserve as many trees as possible. And obviously that was my goal anyway as natural resource manager. So we looked at all the trees, we identified them by species and size, and we had them put on the plans and labeled so that as the process went through, we knew exactly what would be coming out, what we needed to work around to protect through fencing or through construction methods. And then this is what it looked like when it was finished. That's the same section of stream that I showed you before with the combined sewer where you can see the top of it. So we used live stakes and native plants and trees to restore it. We used erosion control blankets and seeded it with a native seed mix. It was a really good project. It was a fun project to work on. And these are the kinds of projects that my company does now that we can help out with. This is Glenway Woods. This stream was similar. There's a combined sewer underneath it. This one had to be relined. And then they engineered the stream to make it bigger and wider. Before, this was just pretty much a channel that looked like the one I showed you before in Alt Park before it was restored. And so this one, they engineered to be able to handle more stormwater because they did separation on the street grid above. So where we had stormwater inlets along the roadways above the park, this park is essentially a valley. And then the water is piped down the slope and into this and opens up and daylights through this reconstructed stream channel. And so they designed it so that during low flow, the water would flow through the gravel storage layer below this aggregate right here, below the limestone. And then they were also able to install a haul road, and they used decomposed granite for the surface, so it is pervious. And this park was largely inaccessible before this project. So afterward, we had a walking path through the park. a restored stream channel, and then that was replanted with native trees and plants. And then it culminates in a wetland. This is retention. This was a basin that was there before, that was constructed a long time ago, but was no longer functional. It had some pretty mature elm trees in it that we tried our best to work around and keep in the system so that it would be a shaded wooded wetland. Wooded wetland habitat is the #1 priority for our state urban forest plan or state forest management plan for preservation and restoration. And we're able to use this project to leverage grant money. We got, I believe, $250,000 for this project through U.S. Forest Service grant for the water quality improvement of the Ohio River Basin was the title of the grant. And this kind of folded right into it. So from here, when we get heavy rains, it goes into the overflow and flows into a dedicated channel that takes it out to a larger daylighting project that's happening downstream. It's a mile-long stream daylighting project through the heart of a different community. And I just want to state again that it's pretty incredible. All the stone was hauled in. This was a big project. This is a long way to go. It was not cheap. I don't know what the total construction cost was, but the end result is just amazing. And then this was the existing basin was planted with wetland plants, some in stream, some on the edges. We preserved the big trees that we could, and we also planted new ones to take the place of ones that wouldn't make it. So to summarize, parks and public spaces can be used for managing stormwater and provide additional public amenities. And that's the key to green infrastructure. It's those additional amenities that you get out of it. It's not just getting water to a stream or through a pipe. It's about making it part of the space and the experience. And we were, these projects demonstrated how we could use green roofs to lengthen the lifespan of a roof on a public building while reducing energy. That was very important. And then the research opportunities and education and bringing groups in and training them on green roof installation has been amazing. They also leverage money from that. Removing invasive species should be a part of all of these projects. Can also improve park access and recreational opportunities. The example of the Hall Road going into Glenway Woods Park is a great example. That park was largely inaccessible, but now people are using it much more often. And providing educational opportunities through signage, through nature interpretation, increasing tree canopy and reducing urban heat on effect through evapotranspiration and shading. And then the one thing that I wanted to add in here, Kathleen Wolf is a researcher at the University of Washington, and she did a quite extensive study on green infrastructure, stormwater systems, and the impact on human health. It was very interesting. If you look at it economically, we're saying all these things are expensive, and we know that parks, are kind of at the lower rungs of the funding revenue source, but human health services cost nearly 17% of the annual U.S. gross domestic product. So, I mean, those are big numbers. Those are very, very, very big numbers. And when we start to think about and leverage these systems as being, making people healthier and more resilient, then we can't afford not to do it. So that's what I have for you today. Any questions?
Thanks, David. That was really great. Yeah, feel free if you're on Zoom to unmute yourself and ask questions if you'd like.
I don't particularly have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I don't particularly have a question. I just appreciated getting this insight. We're looking at doing a mixed use development, and one of our strategies is how we integrate our open spaces with stormwater, thinking about how you take, detention basins, which are 95% of the time grass fields that are never used, and start to use them when they're not being used for stormwater detention or anything like that. So we're just starting that process, and it's very helpful getting your perspective on things and maybe try to steal some of your ideas or what you've discovered.
Thank you. Yeah. And I gave you a couple ideas, the, kind of regrading the slope at Sotterkula Park, I thought was an interesting use. And then also the playground. I mean, I thought that was just genius. I mean, the children aren't going to be out there when it's raining or anyway, and you've created a detention structure that is going to be there for years and years and years and years. And I just thought that was really a cool thing. I'm sure there's cleanup that they have to do after big rains, sweeping them up and spraying them down and cleaning them. But I thought that was really cool. And Gail asked a question, I think on chat. Does the city of Cincinnati have any plans to quantify the benefits after the investment they put into the stream restorations? So that's an interesting question, Gail. The city is working on a very large project now. It's one of the most interesting projects probably going on in the country. It's a mile-long stream daylighting project right through the heart of a community that has been in decline for decades. It lost half of its property values, declined. People moved out of the city. And they're using this stream project to create a public green space that is about at least half the length of it. It's got a walkway, bike trail, combo trail down it, and it's pretty amazing. So they're looking at it not just as what's the benefit, I mean, there's some benefit to property values and things. I've done quite a bit of work with looking at public green spaces that have been constructed next to existing communities and what that benefit is. And I have that information I can share with you. But they also looking at it, I mean, they created a whole new community around this. They rezoned it. What's going to be retail, what's going to be park property, where there's a spray ground and there's a public meeting place there. And then, of course, they're going back through and reforesting the whole thing, and they're doing offloading at the street level with tree trenches and plantings. And so that's going to be an interesting one to follow. And I'll be on here again in a week. I'll see if I can find the drone footage link and show you what that project looks like next week when we, if you're back here again, I'll be talking about more specifically the different vegetation choices that we can make for stream restoration, for pond restoration, for improving stormwater quality while also reducing maintenance costs and stormwater flow. So I think that one you'll find interesting too. I look at, kind of where the impacts on our streams are based on development and different options at a more of a local scale. If you don't have the money to build a giant, stream through your community and do a big, huge green roof.
I had a quick question. I know it's a little after 1 now, but in terms of, you just mentioned funding. In terms of funding, where are you finding that's coming from for these projects? Is it coming mostly through grants or through the cities themselves?
Well, like in Cincinnati, they're under a consent decree to fix their combined sewer system. So that one is driven by regulatory side of things. MAMO was more driven by the city. They see it as the right thing to do. And I have a more in-depth presentation on that one too. I can come back again in a few months or whenever you want. But I have more in depth on that about how they redeveloped a harbor area, and they incorporated a canal system to, well, they actually built it up 10 meters high with dredged fill from the ocean so that it would be more resilient to climate change. And then they built this whole new community, and it's amazing with the street grids, and they built this canal system through there. And they actually required the development people to submit proposals on how they were going to offset their stormwater that fell on individual development properties. So there's some really creative ideas from that too, with living walls and green roofs and basins. And they did quite a bit of work with bioinfiltration along some of their major thoroughfares. Kind of really interesting stuff. So that, as I said, that was a combination of the city driving it and knowing that they were going to have to pay a little bit more for the development end of it, but then also requiring the developers to incorporate it in part of their development project. But that requires total buy-in by your community, by your city leaders. And that's very difficult to do.
Yeah, it is. But we're trying. So that's really awesome. I'm sure it was amazing to be over there. So if nobody has
the last thing I have to say, our company has an eco newsletter, and if you want to be signed up for it, I can get you my email. You can send me your contact information. All I need is an email address, your name, where you work, what you do, and then we can get you on our email list. I'll be working on a series this year on plants. So the first one is getting to know your green infrastructure plants. So it's kind of a different animal. Well, plants are different from animals, but it's plants that can handle very dry situations because the basins are designed to dry out, but then also can handle water inundation. So there's not a really extensive palette of plants that we can use and be successful on. And then we also want to have a horticulture component because we want people to accept these things. We don't want them to say, oh, that's just a weedy ditch. We want it to look nice and be, effective for pollinators and other things. So that'll be part of the series for this year.
That sounds great. And I did provide your email address. If people are not finding that, feel free to contact me and I'll connect you both. But yeah, if nobody has any other questions, I really appreciate that presentation. I love that you titled it Reimagining because I feel like I did that with this time. So thank you. And looking forward to next Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dave.
It's been fun.
Thank you.